God does not exist. So, now what? That's the question I found myself stuck with when, at the age of about 12, I realised that my somewhat milquetoast Church of England education had failed to have a significant impact on my view of the world. But as much as I then took it to be the case that there was no God, as much as I hate to admit it, religion also had several important points. Things, as it happens, actually matter. Many things in the world require explaining, and understanding those things is important and very interesting. It's important to have a sense of self and a sense of community in your life. It's important to have a sense of direction, goals. It's important to have somewhere to hang out from time to time. Now, for a long time, religion had a sort of monopoly on that, but now finding myself without a God in my life, as it were, I had to find a school of thought that would provide that for me some other way. So I started with New Atheism, the so-called Richard Dawkins School of Atheism, for guidance. Now, Richard Dawkins was a seminal thinker in the world of atheism, and in the 80s was very important. And there are probably many communities around the world now where his direct approach is still going to be very useful. But joining many communities that were into him, online, on the internet at the time, kind of a problem. It turns out a closed forum where everyone bangs on about how smart they are because they don't believe in God. Kind of cult-like. And a cult about rational thought, still a cult, not very rational. So I tried other things. First I tried nihilism, but you don't get invited to many parties that way. I tried hedonism, but there's only so many parties you can go to. I tried cynicism, and that's a great way of being told to leave parties. So, that drew me to humanism, or accurately, that drew humanism to me. There is no one humanism, I think we've established that. But humanism, I wouldn't describe myself as a humanist so much. I'd say humanism sort of describes what I think and how I feel at this moment in time. So here's some things that humanism means to me and how I use it, and I welcome challenge and strenuous disagreement because that too is a big part of humanism, as well as reading Douglas Adams. So, things I get out of humanism. First and foremost, humanism encourages a humble intellectual curiosity, a way of looking at the world. The vast majority of people, whatever they believe, the vast majority of the time, do not understand most of the things they hold to be true from first principles. I flew from Copenhagen today, I don't understand how aeroplanes work. I just have to put faith in the fact that someone else knows how they work. And so it goes for most things in my life. When you acknowledge this humility, you can truly approach important intellectual questions with rigor. And not just the big what is life things, but every question in your life, you will get so much more done if you approach people with an open mind and an open heart and a capacity to learn. That for me is a big part of humanism. Second, many of the big questions in life do actually come from secular perspectives. It has a very long storied history of working out why be good, what's it mean to be good, what should I be doing, what should I have for lunch, should I eat this prawn sandwich, supposedly a debatable question that way. And humanism does provide a means to inquire about these things, and more to the point, actually, humanism's ahead of the curve in trying to answer all of these things from a secular perspective. It's quite evident in this day and age that although organised religion is in decline in the West, people are looking for meaning in other places. And if a positive secular worldview is not created, something else will fill the void. Right now, for a lot of people, that's politics. And for a lot of people, many of those flavours of politics are very unpalatable. So I see that humanism has a growing place if we're willing to take it. Third point about why I enjoy humanism, why it's important to me. I'm ashamed to admit it introduces me to a lot of interesting people who think a lot of the same things that I do. I think that's important. I think pretty much everybody needs that, and to pretend otherwise doesn't really make you human. Apologies to anyone who doesn't think that way, it's technically I do the story. And let's see, what was my last point? I've made it this far without notes. Let's see if I can square the circle and deliver the last point I had in mind about why humanism is so important. Actually, no, you tell me what. I'll leave it as a mystery so you can come and ask me afterwards and satisfy your intellectual curiosity as well. Thank you.
I'm explaining why Audrey is my humanist hero. She's my first female friend as an atheist humanist. When I was a believer, when I was in church, we would call ourselves sisters, brothers. And when I became an atheist, I didn't have that. So she was my first sister. She was my first atheist humanist family. And a lot of humanist atheists, especially in the West, they are philosophical, very sophisticated in thinking. I have to say I'm an emotional atheist. I'm an emotional humanist. When, of course, it was science that took me out of religion. I was raised as a Seventh-day Adventist. I don't know anyone knows about the Seventh-day Adventist church. If you don't know, I don't know if you've heard about David Koresh in the 90s and his cult, that ended in huge tragedy. So I'm from that background. And when I became, it was science, learning about astronomy, learning about evolution. I've been questioning religion since I was young, but I still stuck with it. I believed in it, and I was very passionate. And then when I lost my faith, it was, what do I do now? What do I do with it? At first, I was really lost. And if you are black and you leave religion, because where I come from, Nigeria, I think about 98% are religious, and not just moderately religious, fundamental belief. And religion will be everything, your family life, your social life, everything. So when I became an atheist, I lost that. I lost friendship, I lost relationship with a lot of my family. So I was looking for a community, and then I joined London atheist group. That was a disaster. Unfortunately, when I joined, it was around the same time that I lost my mom. And I remember going to the meeting and then reaching out. And then the lady said to me, the lady that was heading the group said to me, you need to see a psychologist, or I don't know what she said, psychologist, psychiatrist. You know what, I had to go back to church, because at least in church, you had the warmth. They surrounded me. They would hug me. They would sing for me. And, I needed that at the time. And, I didn't go for long. I think it was just for 3 weeks, and I couldn't cope with, a lot of what they were saying. But I was still looking. And then I found I found the Humanist UK, and then the Central London Humanist. And, like I said, I am an emotional humanist. I found everything that I was looking for. I found community. I found friendship. I found, the kinship that you find in religion. Sometimes why people stay in religion is not because they care so much about what is going on. Sometimes it's about the love. Sometimes, a lot of atheists, they bash religion so much, forgetting about what binds people and what ties people to religion. Sometimes it's not people don't care so much about facts sometimes. They are so what there is no God. What do you do day to day? I was talking to somebody last week. When I was a believer, there were preachers that I would listen to every day before I went to work. There was a lady called Joyce Meyer. She would talk about if you are angry, somebody upsets you, how to bite your tongue, how to behave. Day to day. If you lose love, how do you deal with that? I have my only child has a genetic condition, and we are living with matters of life and death on a daily basis. How do I go through that as a human being? In religion, I had the comfort, even though it's false promises. You know, they would tell me some demons were after me, and you know, I'll be praying against those demons. As a humanist, how do I deal with that? You know, how do I deal with all my daily life concerns? You know, anger, love, you know, sadness, everything. How do I found that within the community in humanism, and that is my journey. And for anyone here who may be in that situation, who is not, maybe, you know, I don't care too much about Socrates and all these philosophers. I really, it doesn't put food on my table sometimes, you know, it doesn't put, you know, the joy. I remember when I was a believer, we used to talk about the joy of the Lord, and it's a real joy. The joy of the Lord is my strength. It was a real feeling, but I found it, and I found that joy again in humanism, and praise be to humanism.
Hi everyone, I would like to read 2 poems that I have written which are loosely based on why I am a humanist. So, the first poem is called God Doesn't Like CP. For those who may not know, CP stands for cerebral palsy. I woke up one day in a fit of rage. The walls grew around me, locking me in. No heavenly being was going to save me now. God was preoccupied on the loo, taking a shit. It wasn't my fault I was disabled, you see. I doubted for a long time that a being never existed such as he. My muscles ached from CP, that was for sure. God was testing me, that was for sure. Like a giant lab rat experiment to see how much I can endure. God was love, some would say, but I looked the other way, for the fear of being rude, certainly in my childhood at least. As an adult and as a humanist, I shouted back and said, I'm not on the rack of God's torture chamber. Medical science messed up. Don't make up evil fairy tales about me. So I carry on in life with a bunch of friends who don't think twice about comforting me. We are called humanists, you see, and we are grounded in reality. And not some airy-fairy fantasy of religion to explain away my disability. Thank you. The second poem that I will read tonight is called The Chosen One. And in the darkness of time, there was God also, they thought, a heavenly being to look after us all. That was the way I was brought up in my small little world, where everything seemed big and God seemed like a giant. And I had done something bad, terrible without a doubt in my last life, some would say, in their religious persuasion. I need to repent and pray for my sins and then I would walk again. But no, it was not to be. I was ordered to touch the feet of holy men in order to see their blessing. One of them ended up in prison just recently. I was surrounded by people who thought they loved me, God's chosen one. They were living in an illusion themselves. Do you want to see him? Yes, please, I said. Believing in fairies and unicorns too, but he could kill you if you prayed hard enough. Now I can recite those prayers backwards. My mind began to expand as I grew. I didn't want the myth of yesterday clouding my vision. I became too old for fairy stories while some adults weren't. What loving God would create a visibility like this? I thought. I entered the CLHG and found friendship here. See, my friends told me that I was perfectly imperfect, but that was alright. Everything was alright. While yes, my disability was a tragedy, it was hardly my fault. You see, medical negligence, they said, was to blame. Here is some science about how the universe began and I was home again. Thank you for listening.
So our next speaker is Amit Malde, and this was a new one to me. His humanist hero is Percy Shelley, romantic poet, so maybe we'll have some more poetry from Amit. But please welcome Amit.
Good evening, guys. I'm Amit. Thank you all for having me. Thanks to the committee for inviting me. I'm not going to go into why Shelley's my hero, but there are 3 reasons I will be around later to talk about them. So I'm of Jain heritage, and despite no longer identifying with a religion, I am proud of the fact that that's my background. And that's predominantly because it taught me 2 fundamental values which I continue to have to this point, which is central to my current moral outlook. And they are vegetarianism and pacifism, which I believe also fit in with the humanist moral, slightly looser humanist and moral position. So growing up in the UK, I had a slightly confusing upbringing and exposure to religious teachings. I went to technically a Christian school populated predominantly by Jewish children, so the Abrahamic narrative was very strong in my formal education, whilst the Indian aspects dominated my out-of-class learning. But this was equally confusing because there were a lot of distinctions there are a lot of distinctions between Hinduism and Jainism that kind of get muddled through translation or poor comprehension by those who are teaching it to me. So because of the many different flavors of religion I saw growing up, it was quite easy for me to take a sort of objective outsider perspective, and none of them really spoke to me. I kind of felt that I had a choice of all of them, and I didn't really feel any of them quite appealed to me. I remember reading about the exploits of the monkey king Hanuman, leaping over a 70-kilometer strait over an ocean or a river in battle, or the fantastical exploits of warriors in Mahabharata. They were all clearly exaggerated to divine magnitudes. But then I remember learning about Jesus and the 40 days of temptation. He just chilled in the desert, a rather unspectacular achievement. And I vividly remember as a child thinking that I'd have believed more in Jesus if he was able to zap the devil with his laser eyes. But unfortunately, this superpower was voted down in the First Council of Nicaea, 325 AD. I think going on a few years, perhaps the most defining moment of my non-belief, the one that catalysed it, was being shown Life of Brian in RE class. I really don't think any religion could come back from that. But it was still over a decade before I became an overtly committed atheist. I was once told about Richard Dawkins, and I went home immediately and started reading God Delusion, and then quickly fell into the rabbit hole of humanism and started discovering it, and for the first time, something spoke to me. I feel it matched exactly how I felt. Many of the aspects of humanism I vocalised in one way or another, but others I perhaps not quite thought of in such a succinct form. The one that I still love to this day the most is that we have one life, and following on from that, kind of says like, indulge in culture and do what you love, as long as you're not causing harm, embrace it. It's something that I feel separates us from formal religions. And then, eventually I read the Humanist Manifesto, and immediately upon reading that, I was committed for life. And I think recently I discovered an element of Jainism which really troubled me, and that is, it has 6 defects, and one of them is laughter. And for me, bringing that back to the humanism thing, that we have one life, enjoy it, I really feel that we're completely at odds with some of the teachings, even of a religion which has aspects that I still believe in and respect. So that's the intro over. When I was sent the brief, I knew why I was a humanist. That part was easy. But recently, I grappled with another question. So whilst preparing for my first session as a Humanist UK school speaker, I wanted to get some input from, I put it out in one of the groups here, to kind of understand from other people why they were humanists. And the one thing I couldn't quite answer was why are we active members of Humanists UK? Rather than being humanists by name or definition, why are we congregated in this room? Why are we members of CLHG, maybe members of Humanists UK? We know many people identify as humanists, and many other match humanist values without realising or declaring it. So this is the question which I still have not yet been able to find the answer. Lola touched on it, the sense of community. I think we have campaigns, we have other things. So I'm still answering this question, and I'd love for the 50 or so people that gathered here today, if you have any thoughts on this, please do grab me. Let's see if I can start filling in that picture. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Verity, and her hero is the much missed Christopher Hitchens, who I think was an inspiration to many of us. So here with her talk, Lincoln's Right, Docility and Doctrine, please welcome Verity Richardson.
Thank you so much for having me here this evening, firstly. I did think of going a bit sort of David Copperfield, I was born, I grew up, but I've only got 5 minutes, so I will try to squeeze in where I think humanism and I guess my faith has come into this, or lack thereof. A bit unusually compared to our other speakers, which I think is one of the nice things about humanism and having lots of different variety, is I actually didn't come from a particularly religious background, to be honest. My parents, I guess you count them as Christian, but we went to church at Christmas, it wasn't really a big thing. Interestingly, probably slightly unlike some of my peers, they made the decision not to baptise me because they wanted to let me make that decision for myself, which is one of the things I've always really appreciated. I then went to a Catholic primary school, complete with sort of nuns and a little canon sort of scattered around in the back corridors occasionally. I know all the parables, should anyone read them. But, that was because that was the, closest school to my house, to be honest. And then the same for senior school. I went to a Church of England school where I had to go to chapel every single day, and for an hour on Fridays, right? I think about it now and what I could have done with that time. Yeah, but you don't think at the time to say, do you know what, actually, this isn't for me. I'm not going to make a fuss, but I'd like to go to the library and read a book, I don't know. And then that kind of continued through life, to be honest. I just thought, well, who cares, right? I never felt particularly religious, so I'll just continue as is. You go through the life events that people do, go to people's weddings. And then I started to notice a few things that it just made me feel a bit, about it all. So a good example, actually, recently I was at a christening, and I think it was just after COVID, actually. They normally do christenings quite young, so the babies are about 6 months, they can't talk. But this one, obviously God had to close the churches, during the sort of plague hit us all. And so I was at a 2-year-old's christening, which is a slightly bit more unusual. And I had this moment as I was stood next to my friend who was the godparent, and someone's holding a toddler who's screaming, "No, no, no!" over a fall, as someone's pouring water in their head, and I thought, this doesn't feel very consensual, to be honest. And then I've kind of had experiences like that as well. I have very non-religious friends who then get married in churches and stand and swear to love someone else in front of a God that they don't believe in. And it just didn't really sit right with me. So that was the kind of moment of sort of thinking about other things. The kind of thing that drove me slightly more towards humanism as well is I just feel like, very sadly, that the world is starting to slide backwards ever so slightly with regards to all of that. And unfortunately, there are quite a small group of people in the world who shout very loudly about what they believe in. And one of the things I've always found really important to me is my freedom. So I'm really, forever thankful my parents gave me the freedom to make that choice myself about my religion. I actually think everyone should be able to have that choice. And it kind of occurred to me that you know what, in the UK, I'm incredibly lucky to be able to not care. And, you know, the worst I get is I'm on the way to work and someone's screaming about me, you know, on a microphone about how I'm going to go to hell because I don't believe in their God. But at least no one is denying me access to education. They don't have a doctrine which says, do you know what, if you leave our religion, your fate is death, which some of them still do. And I just felt that for too much of humanity, that silence has been acceptable, right? And you just kind of, well, it doesn't really affect me, so who cares? Well, it turns out I care, really. And so, for me, it's really saying, well, do you know what? There is a positive we can bring to all of this, and to say, you know, yes, other people have those views, and I actually think everyone should be able to have exactly the view that they want. But I will defend that right for them, and I wanted to be able to be a bit more proactive in that way, really. So yeah, that's really my journey towards humanism. And I guess the other thing that's a real hope for me is that at some point we get to a conversation about humanism that doesn't involve religion. I know it sounds really silly, but I always feel like it's seen as this antithesis against it, whereas actually it's just supposed to be a positive view by itself. But yes, anyway, happy to chat with anyone later, but thank you very much.
As well. I'm going to launch straight into a poem. I don't have what is humanism, but I've got a poem called What's a Humanist? They trust in methodologies objective and specific. They describe observed phenomena in a manner scientific. They reject all explanations couched in ghosts or ghouls or spirits. They circumscribe their arguments with naturalistic limits. They ask to see the evidence before they reach conclusions. They prefer to confess ignorance than make up false solutions. They try to meet all human beings with kindness and compassion, and to treat all other animals in corresponding fashion. They've no evidence of afterlife, so reasonably deduce that this is the one life that we have of any earthly use. They put aside the magical claims of many an ancient text, and instead use moral judgment to decide what to do next. So in answer to your question, having thought the whole thing through, I'd say it sounds a lot like me. Would you say it's like you? Thank you. So I'll give a very potted history of my journey to humanism. It feels like it would fit with this glorious theme of the evening. My grandparents came to the country as part of the Windrush generation and brought with them a very strong Catholic faith from their Caribbean island of Dominica. And my parents continued that. My mum very much because she believed, my dad very much because it was a family expectation. And so I saw both of those different attitudes to religion as I was growing up, and I was very much on my mum's side. I believed strongly, and I loved going to church, and I learned my stories, and I was the swot at Sunday school. But then as I was going through adolescence, I started to become aware of my sexuality, and as a gay man, going through my confirmation was very challenging, and hearing some points of view which really made me question the legitimacy of my identity. And I was having some conversations with the priest who was taking us through, and ultimately decided that I couldn't associate with the Catholic faith anymore. It just didn't fit for me. I went through with my confirmation because I knew how much my mother and grandmother would want me to, but I kind of dropped my faith. But I hadn't dropped what I saw as my cultural Christianity, because I still felt so comfortable in churches. I loved the peace and the tranquility, and I loved the stained glass, and it was great singing hymns. It was only when I was at university that I started having conversations with more people about faith and non-faith, belief and non-belief, that I started to see how damaging I felt religion could be, in the way people made judgments about what they thought was right and wrong, and what they thought other people should be able to do or not. And so that really spurred me towards atheism, which I was very happy to label myself as for a long time. I was a proud atheist, maybe even an angry atheist for a little while, because I felt personally affronted by the way my sexuality was attacked by the church. But I very soon became unhappy identifying myself with a negative. As an atheist, I was telling people what I don't believe in. What's the point of that? I wanted to express positively to people what I do believe in. and went searching around for a label which might help me do that. And when I found humanism, I was delighted because I really felt it struck at my core beliefs, this turning to science for explanation and understanding of how the universe might work, for secularism and believing that everyone should have the right to believe what they choose to without privilege or hindrance, being atheistic or agnostic in my outlook, and finally believing in kindness and compassion as the driving force for my moral choices. And finally reaching that label and being so comfortable with it, I work now as a teacher in a secondary school. It really troubles me how many young people accept a label which is foisted upon them, not one that they've chosen, one which they inherit because of their family's beliefs. And so this next poem looks at that issue. It's called Labels. I'm not a Christian child, I'm a child. I do not know if Christ rose from the dead, if he was born in a stable or a shed, or wore a crown of thorns around his head. Let me play. I'm not a Jewish child, I'm a child. I do not know if the Torah is divine, if God is all-knowing, all-present, or for all time, or if he especially blessed our ancient line. Let me play. I'm not a Muslim child, I'm a child. I do not know how many times each day the mighty one decreed that we should pray, or if we have to face a certain way. I give charity because it's fun. Let me play. I'm not a religious child, I'm just a child. Not Buddhist, Sikh, Republican, or Jain. Do gods exist? Can they experience pain? Do they really get to rummage through my brain? And why? And how? And is it right or fair that gods I don't believe in poke through there? I can't vote yet. Can't even drive a car. How can I work out what the metaphysical realities of the universe are? I've so much yet to learn, so much to see. It's unfair to assume these things of me. What I believe or reject is mine to say. So please, don't label me. Just let me play. Again, as a teacher, I see something sometimes from the child's perspective, sometimes from the parents. And this poem is about that particular parent who might not really buy into the whole faith things, but knows that it comes with certain privileges. It's called Belief in Belief. I don't believe that nonsense, but it's worth it for the kids. It'll put them back on track whenever life just hits the skids. It'll give a sense of purpose, of identity and pride. It'll make them feel all treacly and syrupy inside. Whenever they're being bad, they'll know that someone up there's seen it. So they'll quickly change their attitude and claim they didn't mean it. It really doesn't matter if they're something of a fool. Faith ensures a place is saved at the most prestigious local school. That's why I'm here each Sunday, signing up to stack the chairs on the tea and biscuit roster in a hat marked Jesus Cares. But I tell you, once he's old enough to deal with his own sin, and securely in the local school, I think I'll pack it in. Thank you. Thank you very much. It's so wonderful to be in a space where we recognise the importance of that freedom of thought. And it's, as speakers earlier have eloquently said, devastating to think about those contexts in which people aren't given that same privilege. And I'm really proud of how much the humanist movement fights for those people and seeks to give them a voice. This poem is called The Happy Humanist. She wears her happy humanist badge with evangelical pride. The t-shirt reads, "Good without God," in letters bold and wide. She carries over her shoulder a vintage BHA tote, stuffed with postcards, each emblazoned with a Bertrand Russell quote. She never utters bless you when Gesundheit will suffice, and finds the term spiritual well-being worryingly imprecise. And that is why she's here today, among the anxious crowd of people who left their religions when leaving wasn't allowed. The apostates huddle meekly over coffee, tea and cake, some staring at the ceiling, some counting breaths as their hands shake. They're here to tell their stories and to feel they're not alone, having changed their minds on an issue that has cost them heart and home. Here, at least it's not a crime, but still there is some danger. Stigma, violence, prejudice from family, friend, and stranger. Everyone deserves the right to have faith and believe, but equally must be allowed to doubt, reject, and leave. And so she serves them coffee, reaching out a steady hand to the other happy humans who have come to understand. Thank you. So alongside my teaching, writing is one of my passions, and I've brought a couple of my other books to just share with you quickly. I spent 2 years teaching in Jordan in the Middle East and had an amazing time out there, which I kind of chronologued in this little collection, anthology of poems, a sort of poetic journal of my time out there. And one of the things which I found really formative for myself was suddenly being in this culture which was immersed in faith and religion. Everywhere you went, people greeted you with the assumption of faith, and all decisions were made with the mindfulness of God and the importance of that in your family, on your work, on your day-to-day life. So it brought a lot of things sharply into focus for me, and that's kind of collected in this book here. It's called Black Iris because black iris is the national flower of Jordan. I had an amazing time out there. This second book is a young adult novel called His Hidden Wings, and this is the book I wish I'd had on the library shelf when I was a student. It's a story about a boy called Aiden who on his 16th birthday magically, painfully, mysteriously grows a tiny pair of perfect blue butterfly wings just beneath his shoulder blades. And he has to deal with it. He has to learn how to come to terms with them, how to accept them as part of his identity. So I'll let you can already figure out the metaphor there. But it's a story which is closest to my heart. And whenever I find young people who've read it, I'm lucky to have it in school libraries and things like that. It's really touching to hear their responses and to see how they figure out the metaphor of the wings, and sometimes they kind of tell you what wings they think they would have, which is lovely as well. I'll be around in the foyer at the end of this session if anybody wants to come and say hi and have a look at any of these books. There are 5 each, all able for you to take away tonight if you'd like to. I'm happy to sign them as well, though that does apparently decrease their value. The scientific mind. Testable, reliable, robust and falsifiable. No fact will be admitted till the evidence permits. Replicating carefully to leave a lasting legacy, we walk through theory cheerfully, progress in spurts and fits. No answers for eternity, just notions for modernity. Within the range of certainty the measurements allow. Willing, should the data choose, to overturn our current views and throw them out as mere fake news, we soundly disavow. Zoologist or heaven gazer, fossil finder or trailblazer, we teeter all on Occam's razor, naturalists at heart. No more noma, our claims and yours are bound by the self-same natural laws. God did it is not an acceptable cause for our discourse to impart. We're burdened with providing proof, or lacking that, evidence of truth sufficient not to appear uncouth in adult conversation. We crave criticism. Help us adore this bounteous universe we explore with curiosity, wonder, and what's more, with joyous celebration. Thank you. That one's a bit of a tongue twister. I'm going to take a sip of wine. And then I'm going to share with you a poem called Son of Ham, which is a poem which looks at the relationship between Christian beliefs and slavery, a relationship which is often overlooked or in fact erased. A lot of people believed in the righteousness of slavery because of clergymen who quoted from the Bible, making it clear that it was a divine edict and that the sons of Ham were supposed to be servants of servants, slaves forevermore. A son of Ham, well I've read Frederick Douglass where he said, our condition tends to worsen when our masters start Bible versing. Christian teachings justify slavery, and here's why. Slaves are all children of Ham. We're being punished for his crime. Ham was Noah's second son. Of all those children, he's the one who reared a son, Canaan by name, who saw Noah's nakedness, and for that shame cursed his father and all his line to be servants of servants for all time. The profit-hungry master race used this tale to keep slavery in place, while tender-hearted congregants still supported slavery as God's will. For every pulpit in the nation preached this tale of Ham's damnation. Till gentlefolk would maim and kill, convinced their cruelty was God's will. A child of Windrush, well I've read Stephen Weinberg, where he said, with or without religion, good people can behave well, and bad people can do evil. But for good people to do evil, that takes religion. Thank you. I'm just going to read two more poems, and they're contrasting in tone. This first one I've chosen because there's been lots of conversation about Richard Dawkins and militant atheists. I remember when I first came to atheism, many a happy hour. I didn't do typing in the forums, I just watched YouTube videos. And I loved them, all of those debates, and particularly when you found a good hitch slap. Oh, that was a joy. So this one's called Militant Atheists. I love militant atheists, their swagger and their clout, the way they punch down ruthlessly and swing their dicks about. They're not so much mere atheists as anti-theists, fighting with the rigour of a mission and a slew of wrongs for righting. They claim religious thinking is illogical and rash, then they try to counter-argue it by giving it a bash. They say all faith is nonsense, that it's wishy-washy wank. Then they put its pants down boisterously and give its arse a spank. I find it so amusing watching them spill their invective that I really rarely stop to recollect. It isn't that effective. In preaching to the choir, it's both funny and successful, but in changing hearts and minds, I'd say, it's harmful and it's stressful. Instead of building common ground, we build the boundaries steeper. Instead of testing new ideas, we dig our heels in deeper. We pit theory against experience, using facts to counter feelings, and quickly find the walls go up as downwards plunge the ceilings. There are winners, there are losers, and there's no one in between. It's like a war has broken out, and the mission is being mean. We could speak with peace instead. Build bridges, break down walls. Engage with words as if in dance. Bring music to our halls. We could use dialogue to let both sides feel like they've won. Let's be honest, it's more purposeful, but it isn't half as fun. Thank you. So as I said, this final poem is a change of tone. And it comes almost directly from my religious upbringing, where we used to learn prayers by heart, and I still have them in my heart. And Our Father is one of the poems, one of the prayers I've repeated most often. And I wanted to turn it into something which was more meaningful to me now, having stepped away from religion. So I changed Our Father into My Father, and tried to use the same rhythm and cadence of the original prayer, but thinking about the influence my dad has had on me personally in my life. My Father who walked on earth, I thank you for my name. The home you made was strong and sure and set me on my path. You gave me each day my daily bread and forgave me my trespasses, teaching me to forgive those who trespass against me, and leading me away from temptation towards a true course for happiness. For your arms were full of kindness, your mind full of wisdom, and your heart overflowing with love. Thank you very much.